The reason we're going towards banning is because we don't have another alternative, and because we haven't thought about how do we prepare the teaching profession around cell phones.
Welcome to Schools In, your go-to podcast for cutting-edge insights in learning. From early education to lifelong development, we dive into trends, innovations, and challenges facing learners of all ages. I'm Denise Pope, Senior Lecturer at Stanford's Graduate School of Education and co-founder of Challenge Success.
And I'm Dan Schwartz. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Education and the Faculty Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning.
Together, we bring you expert perspectives and conversations to help you stay curious, inspired, and informed. Hi, Dan.
Denise, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm super excited about our show today. We have a hot topic. This is a topic that schools are asking Challenge Success to help them with all the time. It is cell phones, the use of cell phones at school. And I know that a bunch of parents and caregivers are also thinking about cell phone and cell phone usage and social media time and screen time and all of those things that, everybody's all up in arms with. As Dan is looking at his phone right now. Okay.
Sorry, were you saying something?
Very
Denise?
clever.
I was checking my.
Very clever, Dan. Anyway, Dan, I have heard you talk about this before, and I've actually been present when people have come up to you and said this question, which is, how do I know when my kid is on their phone for too long? And you have a great answer, so I want you to go ahead and share that.
Right. So part of my job is to give talks, and it doesn't matter what I talk about. I always get the same first question. Right now, it's kind of a vague question about is AI going to be the end of the world?
Okay.
But it used to be. How much time is too much time for my kid on the cell phone? And I sort of explain, if they're not really young, it's mainly a question of opportunity cost. If they're doing that, they're not doing something else. But then I say, if you're asking me that question, it's probably too much.
Right? I love it's just such a good answer, Dan, right? Because obviously this is why, because something is nagging at them. Right. And I think you're right. If they're asking it, it's probably a little bit too much. But it is, I tend to agree with you. It's the opportunity cost. And one of the things that we say at Challenge Success, and when we have a whole thing that we roll out for parents on this, is if it's interfering with sleep, if it's interfering with play, if it's interfering with learning or getting your homework done, if it's interfering with family time, all the things that we know developmentally kids need, then it's probably too much. But I don't want it to sound like it's negative, because there's also a lot of positives. And so we're really lucky to have an expert with us today.
Yes, we are. So we have a three-peat guest, Professor Antero Garcia of the Graduate School of Education, who is also the president-elect of the National Councils of Teachers of English. He was a longtime English teacher in South Central LA. So welcome, Antero. It's good to have you back.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Denise.
So Antero, I remember there were efforts to get each kid a laptop in school, right? This was a big push. Now most kids have cell phones, which are way more powerful than the laptops back in the day. And everyone's trying to ban them in schools. So the irony is good. So how should we think about cell phones in schools? I know you put some thought into this.
I think, so one, I appreciate if you're asking me this question, it's probably too much. And the sense of interference, Denise, right? That, if it's interfering with our ability to be human beings, I think those are probably some good heuristics for us to just kind of move forward with. I guess I will just start and say, it is incredible. We're talking, a decade, two and a half decades, a quarter of a century into the 20th century, and we're still having the cell phone debate.
Yeah.
My preliminary research about cell phones was conducted in 2010. And so we are a decade and a half away from that, when that work was collected, and we're having the exact same conversation. We could go in a time machine, and 10 years ago, we would be having this conversation, including the one laptop per child kind of conversation tied to it. we could probably go a decade in the future and have this exact same conversation.
No,
and we just update
no.
it with
Tell me that's not true, Antero, because you're going to solve the problem.
Sorry, there's more people talking about it now, though.
Oh,
so that's probably a change.
But who do you think those people are, Dan? Also, if I can ask a question around here.
That's not allowed on the show. Okay, sorry, Antero.
I would guess parents.
I actually was going to say we haven't had schools talk about it as much as we've seen now. So parents for sure have always been asking and are worried. We actually have kids who will say, can you ban it during like recess and lunch? Because everyone's just looking down on their phones. Like we're not talking to each other anymore. School buses are like silent, right? Like how bizarre. School buses, like I'm sure the bus drivers are happy, but
that's the dream for the bus driver.
Yeah, it's even the kids I think are talking about it more now. Like even they realize something's not right. But I don't want it to sound too negative, Antero, because you usually do bring up a lot of the positives too. So help us understand this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives, and my concern is the short-sighted nature of what happens when we ban a device. I think it is, Dan, to a point you mentioned earlier, it is a similar concern we're having around AI right now. AI is going to do all of our homework. Therefore, we need to get rid of AI and figure out cool tools to make sure that we can eliminate AI in everybody's writing or whatever other work they're doing. And so I think that's the same conversation that's happening with cell phones. There's a lot of bad things happen with cell phones. Kids are distracted. They're not paying attention to teachers. There's issues of power and authority, and therefore we should just get rid of them. That might fix something for some people, but I think there are some long-term consequences to doing that schools are not willing to think through. And I think that parents with good nature are also not willing to engage with. I think those kids that you're speaking about, Denise, are really kind of offering some sophisticated thinking of, I'd love to get this device banned because of what it's doing to me and my relationships, is actually a really nice starting place for us to think about this, right? What are the relationships that are aided by cell phones and by digital technology? What are the academic uses that are aided by technology? And where are the places where it might hinder my ability to make meaningful connections with people? I think in the same way that when I'm having a face-to-face interaction with somebody, my cell phone is going to get in the way. Or if I'm at the dinner table and I take a peek at my phone, I'm both reinforcing a kind of message to my kids about my relationship to them. And there are places where that cell phone, that same device, allows me to stay connected with family who aren't at the dinner table with me, right? And I think there's some ways where we need to think through, what is the world that we're creating as a result of our relationship and our policies with technology?
Do you think reasoned discourse is going to be enough? I mean, the way people use cell phones strikes me as the way they go gambling, right? They're sort of hoping for a reward signal. And so they keep using it, waiting for the reward signal. And rewards are really powerful. Like if you do research with young kids, you're not allowed to use food, rewards, even love and praise, because they're such powerful shapers of behavior. And so if I had a conversation with my kid about don't use the cell phone, it's going to interfere with your ability to get a girlfriend 10 years from now, is it going to work?
Okay, that is not going to work. Let me just tell you that. That's not going to work. Okay, but so reasoned discourse meaning.
I thought Antero was suggesting that we have a conversation about this with the cell phone users, being the kids.
Yeah, I think there's a thing to unpack before that, and that is as adults, right? And I mentioned my own, poor behavior with cell phones sometimes, right, as a thing that happens. As adults, we don't have very good use in general with our cell phones. And then we place that as a way to distrust young people because they both learn from us how to use cell phones. They learn from each other. And we don't have good protocols on what to actually do with them, which is as a result, because we don't have as adults a good plan, the best plan we come up with is, well, let's just do the kind of blanket statement, let's ban them all, then figure out as a society, what are meaningful ways to use cell phones? And so as an example, every day when I pick my kids up after school, in order to check them out of their after school program, I scan a QR code on my phone. I enter a whole bunch of, it takes forever. It is the longest process. That's actually what I want to talk about on this.
It's for safety, Antero. It's for safety. But yeah.
That is also one of the reasons people want to not ban cell phones, right? Is the safety concern, right? And that is a new landscape for America that is a fascinating one to think through, is the safety implications and cell phones on both sides, right? Like, what are the ways where my cell phone puts young people in peril? And what are the ways that same device allows them to stay connected in moments where they might feel unsafe, in the kind of violent context of what can happen in schools these days. But given that, right, my cell phone every day aids me in professional ways, right? It allows me to stay connected, allows me to engage in my responsibilities as a dad and my responsibilities as a worker. I regularly am engaging with my students, my doctoral students in the School of Education. I connect with them all of the time over research projects. I answer their quick questions as they are trying to figure out what classes to take, and I have no idea how to guide them around that. All of those kinds of questions are mediated on cell phones, both on Slack and on text messages. I reply to emails. There are lots of different kinds of things, and maybe that's all kind of bureaucratic glut, but it's also the ways that people know where and how they can rely on me, and the ways I know I can rely on other people, right? Cell phones play a role. And when we ban them, right, what are we telling people about the role of these devices in their workplace and in their learning context? I think there's some really big missed opportunities, and we should think through what are the meaningful ways where we can pull these in at every age group, right? My 5-year-old kids, my 5-year-old twins don't have cell phones, so it's not a concern there. But I imagine this will be a conversation with them when they enter middle school. That is my guess of kind of where we are.
Oh, yeah.
So Denise, Antero, do we know, are teachers like doing units on cell phone use? Like cell phone literacy, a couple of days of classes on this? Is this being taught explicitly?
There's a smattering of teachers who use cell phones in curriculum, but not curriculum on cell phones. So it might be scan this QR code, or go ahead and use your device, right? If that's a tablet or a laptop or your phone, to look up information or to record or make something, right? There is that kind of stuff. But in terms of curriculum, I actually think the closest we get to that is kind of across these is the intersection of media literacy, right? So you get people thinking about, how do you validate the quality of information? That is only one slice of what cell phones do, right? But it's probably an important slice. Some of our other GSE colleagues have done a lot of work thinking through online reasoning, the role of mis and disinformation, and how we understand that. But again, I think that oftentimes only precludes one form of what kinds of civic and personal responsibilities come up with these devices.
Well, it's also not cell phone specific.
Yeah.
Right.
The cell phone has special properties.
Although I have seen, with the help of the kids, actually designing just in a few places, this is how the phone was developed. This is how the social media was developed. There's a reason why there's a ding or a notification. It's, going back to like Pavlov's dogs, there's a reason why the color is red of this. There's a reason why they have a continuing, you don't come to the end. I don't even come to the end of the New York Times anymore. Like you could just keep reading. Right. And so, we've found that when you bring students into that conversation and help them understand how they are being manipulated, how we all are being manipulated by these, it helps them to understand maybe why they're not able to self-regulate.
Yep. Yeah. That meta awareness, I think, does a lot. Yeah.
It's so intellectual. I mean, shouldn't it be in your health classes?
Well,
this, you will want to look at this all the time. When you're driving, do not do it. People die. I mean, it seems like a health thing rather than a cognitive thing.
But it won't get into your health classes if we ban the devices in every school, right? We missed that opportunity.
You get a big fake plastic one at the front.
No, wait. Let me push back a little bit, just a little bit, Antero, because I'm usually on your side, and I am on your side. But I did do a little bit of research, and there are a couple of studies, right, where, and I haven't seen the U.S. ones. Maybe you have. I've seen one in Norway, one in Sweden, one in England, where they have studied schools that have banned, or classrooms that have been banned and classrooms where haven't been banned, and the effects were interesting, right? Like sometimes achievement goes up or grades go up. That's a whole other conversation we can have. Sometimes the mental health goes up. Sometimes the kids are saying, don't bring them back. Sometimes the kids are saying, they might be banned except for educational reasons at these schools, and the kids appreciate that. But then there's also kids who are like, hey, when it's recess or lunch, that's when I need to get a hold of my boss or my mom, or my orthodontist appointment has been changed or whatever. So they don't like it's all over the map. So what do you say to that?
So I think
what do you say to that?
Help us, Antero.
As we're recording this online, am I being cyberbullied? Is this what's happening?
No, I'm saying it like it's all over the place, right?
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
Full bans, there's partial bans, there's just your teacher bans it when you come in.
But I think in general, our relationship around this policy is ban or not ban, and there might be a little bit of opacity around what kind of banning it means, right? Can you use it during breaks or not? And so, when I did this work a decade and a half ago with young people in my own English classroom, the ways the young people talked about it is, and we can see this as a kind of cultural shift, right? But that was oftentimes lunchtime was when they were catching up with their friends, right? That was the place where they would see each other and make these person-to-person interactions, because they would actually use the social time in hallway breaks and when they could sneak a look at their phones and their teachers weren't looking, to actually socialize with each other on their devices, right? And that little bit of time during lunchtime is when you're going to put your phones away and actually spend time making meaningful interactions, which I think is a reflection on how young people were valuing their learning experience, particularly in the school that I was teaching at. And so to go back to this banning idea, I think you're right that in the short term, right, maybe mental health goes up and maybe focus goes up because we've taken away the thing that young people actually want to do. But what are the long-term effects of doing that, right? We have kids who will then leave school, and then down the road, right, what are the ways where those young people essentially only have one alternative to using cell phones, and that is, when I'm at work, I need to put it away. And I think there's some real class and social class-based assumptions about what that does for the preparation of kids in America.
What you got to say what those are.
So I think, and maybe briefly, the only place where you have to put away your cell phone when you are at work are places like McDonald's, are working class jobs, are the places where your phones are banned during work hours, right? As a professional in a place where I am empowered to make my own decisions and empowered to work with other people in meaningful ways, my cell phone plays an integral role in what I do. And so our schools, in planning to ban kids from using cell phones, is preparing kids for working class jobs rather than preparing kids for the other ways that we might use technology responsibly.
Well, it's an interesting claim. I'm not sure I buy it. So I'm in a position where I make a lot of decisions, but I'm in meetings the whole time, and I don't take out the cell phone because it would be incredibly rude. So I'm not sure. Of course, it's not a hard ban. I could take out the cell phone, but then I wouldn't do very well at the job. The other part that I'm not so sure about is there's a lot of things that kids don't get to do that adults do, and like kids don't get to drive. I think that's okay. It doesn't teach them that when they grow up, they're not allowed to drive. There's a time and a place. But it is interesting to think, do the rules of school set you up for the rules of life in cell phone use?
Okay, so Dan,
Yes.
I am going to put you on the spot right now. I want to know, what is your relationship with your phone?
I've named it Michael.
You've named your phone?
No, I haven't even personalized the voice that talks to me. I use the cell phone for work for the most part.
Do you scroll? Do you
No.
Do you have any social media?
So you have to remember that when people check their cell phones, they're looking because they're going to get something that's interesting, exciting, rewarding. Most of the stuff I get is people that are angry at me. I don't want to open my cell phone and look at it. I don't want it, But no, I use it. I have relatives that I call while I'm driving and things like that. And then I have texting, which I'm not a huge fan of, just because I have to stop walking to text back.
I don't think anyone should be walking and texting, and yet they do. They do.
Riding bikes and texting is one of my favorite things to observe at Stanford.
Scares me.
So how about you? What's your relationship? Have you named it Fluffy?
I have not named my phone, but I will say this. So the iPhone has a thing where you can track usage, and it will tell you how many times you've picked it up, literally picked up your phone, and how many hours reading the New York Times or whatever. And it is very eye-opening. It says I average, I mean, I'm going to admit this it says I average like 6 hours a day, which sounds crazy.
6 hours a day.
But what you have to understand is a lot of that is emailing for work, or yesterday I did a walk and talk meeting. So it counts that, right? It counts that I'm on the phone so it's not that 6 hours a day is not like a fair thing, because a lot of that is work, but then some of that is, I'm scrolling, I'm looking at pictures.
I think we need to put a cell phone lock on your thing. After 3 hours, you're done.
An intervention. Do you want to, we should ban it? I want to bring in something that's really interesting, which is in the state of California, there's a new law that's going into effect, not saying that schools need to ban cell phones, but mandating that schools have a policy where cell phones may or may not be restricted for either all or part of the day. What do you think of that, Antero?
I think policies are great. That sounds great. We should have some kind of policy. I think that policy should probably be tied to meaningful practice of the ways we're supporting young people, right? Again, the reason we're going towards banning is because we don't have another alternative, and because we haven't thought about how do we prepare the teaching profession around cell phones. The people who are training in teacher programs like the Stanford Teacher Education Program are for the most part, in their early 20s. They've grown up with cell phones their entire lives as adolescents, as a known fact. And so they know the good and bad about cell phones, and are incredibly vexed as soon as they walk into a classroom and they're trying to hire an undergrad to work with them, right? They have the exact same experience that Dan has of trying to talk with kids, and all of a sudden something much more interesting than teaching American history is happening on their cell phones, right? And so as a result, we probably need to have a meaningful look at the ways we're preparing teachers who are also on their cell phones during the classes I teach them in our Stanford Teacher Education Program. We should probably think meaningfully about the ways we're preparing teachers and the ways teachers are interacting with kids in schools. And that probably would some kind of policy guidance would be helpful. I'm not convinced that a ban is what that policy guidance should be. But I think there's useful guidelines that we could be creating together.
So I'm going to go teach a class, and I've got these undergraduates in there, maybe some graduate students. Give me a tip, Antero.
Give us some names, Dan. Who are these people?
No, give me a tip. Tell the bunch of kids, I'm in the middle of the best lecture of my life. I'm feeling it, and then 3 kids open up their cell phone. What's a tip? Or if I just wanted to do a lesson on it. So this is really actually a practical question. I'm a teacher. Give me a place to get started, given that I didn't get that curriculum.
So I think there's 2 forks that we could go, 2 paths, two spaces, 2 roads, not even diverging.
One fork.
But 2 roads that we could go. Yeah, 1 fork.
Yeah.
And so one is when we have students, and maybe we're not planning to do curriculum on cell phones that day, and you've got the students who start texting in the middle of class. I think kind of exactly what you did, Dan, at the pause when you were in the one-on-one situation with the student during the interview, is a good opportunity to say, and we're talking about this, I'd like for everyone to put your phones away for this period, right? I think if you said it every day at the beginning of every single class, you're going to lose your effectiveness, right? But if you kind of pull out the personal stakes of, hey, the thing we're talking about is actually meaningful and important. Here's why we're going to talk about it. I need you to put away your phones for this next period, or I need you to be using your phone for X reason, to take notes, to, if you feel comfortable with them recording the conversation, if it's a lecture, whatever the case may be. That feels like a good way to call in young people to work with you with their devices. It also means, though, in order to do that you probably need to have a good rationale of why you're teaching the thing you're teaching. If you want to say this is really important, it's more important than your phone, you should be able to articulate why.
Oh,
so that maybe is
but wait,
you'll need it later in life. That's
I see. Wait a minute.
Oh no!
The teachers around the country are rolling their eyes right now. What we are teaching is important, right? Now there's definitely fluff, there's definitely busy work. I think then if for those of us who are really trying to engage kids and have innovative, interesting lessons and aren't going to just like lecture, we still have issues with kids pulling out their phones. And teachers around the country are saying, I'm tired of being the phone police. Help me.
Well, but Antero's suggesting you can use these as, educable moments.
Oh, 100%. But I'm just saying,
and have a conversation with them about sort of the reasoning. I suspect the response for older kids will be, yeah, my parents told me that.
No, I think we need to get kids in the middle of creating policy. I mean, that's what we do at Challenge Success, right? They will tell you why they're on their phone and why they're not. And, I just don't see the meaning in what we're learning now.
I can just see the kid running for president of the school on the platform of, let's have reasonable cell phone uses, everybody.
Okay, you can laugh, but that would totally get the kid elected. Yes.
Really?
Yes. I mean, if you think about instead of just banning, where should it be allowed? Where, how can we help people self-regulate? How can we teach some cell phone media literacy? The kids know that they're on it. They know the older ones. I do think, just to wrap things up though, what would you tell parents of young kids? Your 5-year-olds don't have cell phones. Is there an age? Is there from your work, what are you thinking?
My 5-year-olds don't have cell phones, but every day they get to watch about 30 minutes of TV, and they get to pick what it is. But lately they have not been picking the same thing, and it has created all sorts of strife. We have one child who's a big proponent of Peppa Pig, and one who's a big proponent of always watching the movie Frozen over and over.
Yeah.
And the way we've solved this is through giving one of them an iPad with headphones. And so that is creating peace and calm in our house, for better or worse. And so I just want to recognize that, mobile media devices are playing a role in our parenting, for better or worse.
Oh,
right?
100%.
And screen time is a whole conversation, right? It's very complicated. We held that as long as we could. And then once the social pressure of their classmates started talking about the shows that they're watching at school, right, our kids felt left behind because they weren't on the same platforms and knowing the same shows and knowing who their favorite character on Spidey and Friends was, right? Like, those are important factors of how young people get acculturated into peer social networks. And so, part of this is recognizing that the reason this is such a complicated issue is because kids care a lot about the relationships they have with other people, and these devices are playing a role in that. And so, part of this parenting conversation and part of how we move forward is to think through and value what young people are doing. I think so much of this, policing of kids in schools, is kids experiencing the tail end of policies and draconian things coming down to them, rather than having meaningful input throughout the process.
I would agree with you with that. I will say there are certain things, because your prefrontal cortex is not fully formed, that you need some guardrails.
Me personally? Is this about me?
Yes, yours, Antero. No, but if you think about sort of a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old, right? There's a reason why they're only allowed a certain amount of TV, and it's not a free-for-all, right? We tell parents to really think about when is appropriate use of the phone. Where does the phone or any kind of device live at night? We want it to be out of the bedroom, because there's very good studies that show that is affecting kids' mental health. So, at dinner time, right? And during family activities, when you're talking to grandma on Zoom or whatever, you're not going to then also be on your phone, right? This is just stuff that naturally happens in the family. And I think if we modeled some of that same kind of conversations at schools, when is time to use it? When is it helpful? When is it harmful?
And when, in the words of Elsa from Frozen, do we let it go?
And when do we let it go? Yeah. When do we let it go?
Nice.
Well, so much. We're going to have a whole other show on this when Antero's kids turn 12, because I'm very interested to see. And also, you said in a decade from now, we're going to be talking about this. And I hope that we have much better answers. But I like how you have made this. It's not an easy ban it, right? It's not an easy anything goes. Let them all use it all the time. Conversations with kids, with parents, with caregivers, with teachers, with bosses who are trying to get a hold of kids during the day, with companies, right? A lot more needs to be done. So we have a lot of work to do, but we really, really good conversation. So thank you, Antero.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us this episode of Schools In. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune in. I'm Denise Pope.
Oh, wait. Sorry. I was texting. I'm Dan Schwartz.